Welcome to Installation and Migration Issues, the third lesson of SEP 14, Maintain and Troubleshoot. In this video, I'll walk you through how to troubleshoot and resolve installation issues with the SEP for Windows client. Let's get started. When installing the Semantic Endpoint Protection client, there are differences between various operating systems. For the Windows version, the installation does the following. The Review Prerequisites phase checks for a pending reboot from Windows. For the client, this is very important, as Semantic Endpoint Protection installs drivers and services on the system. Semantic Endpoint Protection technologies such as Sonar and the Semantic Firewall use these drivers and services. It also reviews system requirements and makes sure that it has access to services like the Windows installer. Finally, it verifies that the user has local administrator rights so that it can run the installation on the system. After the system checks prerequisites, the install phase begins. Depending on whether it's a new installation or an upgrade, the setup creates or updates program folders. If the administrator has added custom settings to the installation, setup references those settings when adding configuration data. An example of configuration data is running a silent installation, perhaps notifying the user that the install is beginning so the user can shut down other applications on the system. It also starts loading drivers, such as TFER for the Semantic Firewall, and services like the Semantic Management Client service on the system. During the configure phase, it begins configuring those drivers and services. An example is an installation package with tamper protection enabled on the system. The setup ensures tamper protection is running to protect those drivers and services. It also applies installation settings and runs live update on the system. There are many reasons a SEP client installation can fail, but I've listed some common use cases. A pending reboot in Windows may require a restart of the system. You may be running low on disk space in which you need to review system requirements. With firewall-related issues, you need to ensure that the firewall is disabled or updated so the client deployment wizard can deliver the install package to the endpoint. If the Windows installer service is not running, it may cause issues with the installation. For more information on these topics and more, see the KB listed on the screen. Let's apply the troubleshooting methodology to resolving a failed SEP for Windows client installation. When gathering evidence, it's important to identify the deployment method. You can install Semantic Endpoint Protection directly on a computer with a client install package. Or if you're not directly in front of the computer, you can deploy with the client deployment wizard. If you're upgrading a group of Windows-based client computers, you can also use Auto Upgrade in the Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager. A lesser used approach is the Push Deployment Wizard, but it allows you to deploy the client software outside of the Semantic Endpoint Protection Manager. Some organizations also use third-party tools like SCCM and Semantic Software Management to deploy the Semantic Endpoint Protection client. It's also a good idea to determine if the deployment method attempt was a new installation or an upgrade. You can also collect installation logs during the gather evidence phase. SEP for Windows records events to the sep_inst.log, sis_inst.log, roru.log, rollback.log, and the Windows Event Viewer. You'll learn more about these logs later in the video. Another approach to gathering evidence is to download SimDiag to detect installation issues. For more information about this topic, see the KB listed on the screen. During the first phase of the SEP 14 setup, Windows Installer installs a significant portion of the SEP client. You can see these events in the sep_inst.log. After reboot, the SMC process completes the SEP 14 installation. The sis_inst.log records events from the SMC process. The setup API.log and tfer-install.log are used to record install actions related to tfer. Tfer is a driver required by the SEP firewall. The setup API.log contains information about tfer and reveals problems if tfer fails to load. tfer is considered a hardware driver. You can locate the setup API.log in C Windows /imp directory and tfer install log in the temp folder. Within an hour after SEP 14 installs, a separate routine removes the previous SEP client. Roru.log logs these events. If the SEP 14 client install fails and rolls back, the rollback log is generated. Windows Event Viewer may also record events on whether the semantic endpoint protection installation was successful. You'll see entries created at the beginning, during, and at the end of setup. Now that we've gathered evidence and established the symptoms, it's time to research. When researching a SEP for Windows client installation issue, use the keywords that you gathered to search the semantic knowledge base. The search results show potential solutions that you can use in the repair and validate phase. You can also search and post on Semantic Connect. If you run a SimDiag, review the results to identify what caused the installation to fail. Verify the system meets minimum SEP requirements by reviewing the installation guide. You can also reproduce the issue on a different system to break apart the problem. Sometimes this is helpful if you have a system that needs to stay online and you can only make changes within a particular change window. On the production system, you can roll back the changes and continue working the issue on the other system. When reproducing the issue, use the following best practices. Identify how SEP was installed and use the same method. For example, if the installation package was pushed to the endpoint using the client deployment wizard, document the steps and reproduce on a system with the same configuration. Also, use the same installation set. Examples include an exported client install package, media from the DVD, or using a command line option for Windows Installer. Determine the account used to install SEP. Is the installation running a system, local administrator, or a particular user? If upgrading, verify the previous version of SEP installed. If a managed client, document the client group to ensure that the system used for reproduction uses the same policy settings. An example would be an endpoint using firewall rules that block ports used by the client deployment wizard. During the research phase, reference the installation troubleshooting flowchart for semantic endpoint protection. It provides an overview of the installation process, key areas to review after the install fails, and how to collect logs. You can verify the endpoint meets minimum system requirements and also identify the deployment method for the semantic endpoint protection client. For example, determine whether the behavior is specific to the installations deployed via the client deployment wizard. If you only see install failure via the client deployment wizard, verify that the environment meets the requirements. Requirements include ensuring computers can be accessed via the network, modifying firewall settings to allow communication, and making sure that you have administrator credentials. For more information on the installation troubleshooting flowchart, see the KB listed on the screen. After identifying the source of the issue, it's time to repair and validate. During the repair phase, you apply a corrective action. Examples of a corrective action are to disable or update the firewall settings for the client deployment wizard. You may also need to enable a particular service, such as remote registry or the Windows installer service. Free up disk space to ensure the system meets minimum system requirements. Or correct a pending reboot with a restart of Windows. In this lesson, you learned how to describe the SEP for Windows client installation process. And you also learned how to troubleshoot and resolve a failed SEP for Windows client installation. For more information about the topics discussed in this lesson, refer to the resources listed on the slide, and remember to frequently check the Semantic Support website. Thank you for watching this video.